Welcome back, everybody, to the Jewish Roots Life Group. And in this episode, we are actually going to be diving into the Ten Commandments. But we're not only going to be diving into the Ten Commandments, we're going to be diving into the first two. And not the first two. Actually, well, I'll show you. We're going to dive into the relationships between commandments. Are there a relationship between the commandments? If so, what are they? And what do they mean? And what are their applications? This is the first of a 5-part series of the relationships of the Ten Commandments, one with the other. But have you ever asked yourself, why are there 10? I mean, why aren't there 15, 20, 30, 40, 50, whatever? And what do they mean? And why these 10? Because Jewish tradition says there are 613 of these commandments. So why these specific 10? In this episode, we're going to look at 2 of the 10 commandments and show a relationship between them. And then continue on from there, a relationship between the next 2 sets, and then the next 2 and the next 2 and so on. So that's where we're headed. But first of all, let's go ahead and provide all 10 of the commandments. And this is a very simplified version. Number 1, you shall have no other gods before me. Number 2, you shall not make idols. Number 3, you shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain. Number 4, remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. Number 5, honor your father and mother. Number 6, you shall not murder. Number 7, you shall not commit adultery. Number 8, you shall not steal. Number 9, you shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. And number 10, you shall not covet. And setting this up, this is in Exodus chapter 20, the very first verse, as God is speaking these words to all of Israel that has just been left the land of Egypt. They just left the land of Egypt, crossed the Red Sea. Now they're at the base of the Mount Sinai, where God himself is speaking to his people. Not just Moses. He's speaking to everybody. The first words out of the mouth of God in verse 1, chapter 20. I am. It's the same I am he said to Moses at the burning bush. Remember when Moses said, well, they're not going to believe me. And when they ask, who sent me? What name shall I give him? He says, I am. So he says, I am, and then he says his name. The Jews would say Yud He Vav He, but with the vowels, Yehovah. I am Yehovah, who brought you out of the land of Egypt and out of slavery. Now that is the most important verse in order to understand the Ten Commandments. So I wanted to bring that home, that the very first words, this is the only time in history that God has spoken to a nation directly, the only time in history, the only time in mankind's history. God directly spoke to Israel and said, I am Yehovah, the one that brought you out of Egypt. Then he tells them these 10 commandments. And this is from the Amplified Bible. You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make yourself any idol or likeness or form or manifestation of what is in heaven, above, or on the earth, or in the water, or in the earth, no, any object of worship. You shall not worship nor serve them. For I, the Lord your God am a jealous and passionate God, demanding what is rightfully and uniquely mine, visiting or avenging the iniquity of sin and guilt of the fathers on the children, that is the calling of the children to account of sins for the fathers, to the third and fourth generations of those who hate me, but showing graciousness and steadfast loving kindness to thousands of generations of those who love me and keep my commandments. The same ones we're reading right now. You shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain, that is, irreverently, in false affirmations or in ways that would impugn the character of God. For the Lord will hold guiltless, nor leave unpunished the one who takes his name in vain, disregarding its reverence or its power. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. Set it apart, dedicated to God. 6 days shall you labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath, a day of rest dedicated to the Lord your God. And on that day you shall do no work. You, your son, your daughter, your servants, your livestock, temporary residents or foreigners who stay within your gates. For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, the sea and everything that's in it, and he rested on the seventh day. That is why the Lord blessed the Sabbath and made it holy, or set apart, for his purposes. Honor, respect, obey, or care for your father and mother, so that the days may be prolonged in the land the Lord your God gives you. You shall not commit murder or unjustified deliberate homicide, or in another place shedding innocent blood. You shall not commit adultery. You shall not steal, either secretly, openly, fraudulently, or through carelessness. You shall not testify falsely, that is, lie, withhold, manipulate the truth against your neighbor or any person. You shall not covet, that is, selfishly desire and attempt to acquire your neighbor's house. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife, their servants, oxes, donkeys, or anything that belongs to your neighbor. So there are the 10 commandments that were spoken from God to Israel. So why are there 2 sets of 5? Why not just one big long list of 10? Is there a relationship from one side to the other? That's where we're headed. So the first ones that I want to look at are commandments 1 and 6. In other words, the first commandment and then the first commandment on the other side, which would be number 6. So what are commandments 1 and 6? Commandment number 1, you have no other gods before me. Commandment number 6, you must not murder. Is there a relationship between these two? And if so, what is it? What does this mean? So you have commandment 1 and commandment 6 directly across from each other, and let's look at the relationship. But first we have to define our terms, define our words, and once we see that definition, it'll become more clear. There's no doubt that the shedding of innocent blood is murder. War was not considered murder. Killing is not the same as murder in some aspects, but both should be avoided at all costs and have severe consequences. And you can see here in the original Hebrew that the word is not kill, the word is actually murder. So a lot of versions say thou shalt not kill. And in a sense, you can say that, but the true word is murder. And murder has a specific definition, a little bit different than killing. Because murder is the willful and wanton disregard of the life of another person. That's not necessarily a definition of killing. I mean, you can kill someone in self-defense, but you weren't trying to really murder them. You were just protecting yourself or someone else. Look at Proverbs 6, and this will help clear it up a little bit. Proverbs 6, verse 16, there are 6 things that the Lord hates. No, 7 that he detests. Haughty eyes, a lying tongue. Oh, we'll get to that one down here in the Ten Commandments. Hands that kill the innocent, or in some versions say shed innocent blood. A heart that plots evil, feet that race to do wrong, a false witness who pours out lies, that's in the Ten Commandments, and a person who sows discord in a family. These are the things God hates. And look at what is highlighted in yellow here. Hands that kill the innocent or shed innocent blood. That is murder. That's what we're talking about. So commandments 1 and 6, let's look at them side by side. Don't have any other gods but me, or don't have, thou shalt have no other gods before me. What does that mean? Well, when we have another God before the God, Yehovah, it says we depend on ourselves and not on God. We make ourselves to be our own God with a little g. So when we sever our relationship with the Almighty God and go our own way, we then make ourselves to be our own little g God. And that leads to destruction. And boy, bad things happen. And that's what we're talking about here. Now, any idol replaces the relationship of God. That's why God says, don't have any other gods before me. So any idol, any god, replaces that relationship. In other words, you're saying, God, Almighty God, I don't need you anymore. I have this little g God, or whatever it is. And you're replacing that relationship of your great Creator with something else. And that's why God hates it. And the last thing, when you choose to go on your own, when you choose to sever that relationship with God and make yourself your own little g God, then no other life matters but your own. Oh, I think you can see where we're headed with this. When no other life matters but your own, oh, now we can get to the other side, the other category of murder. That's right, you can see the relationship now. So let's go to the do not murder side. We make ourselves our own little g God by imposing our selfish will over another. So in other words, when we do not when we do not obey, when we do not respect, when we do not abide by don't have any other gods before me, it leads to this. We make ourselves our own little g God by imposing our selfish will over the will of another person. So when you murder somebody, that's what you're doing. You're imposing your will over theirs because you're being selfish. Second point is we cancel the other's relationship with God or the opportunity to have one, which is very, very serious. Think about that. When we murder someone, that person that is murdered no longer has the opportunity to have a relationship with the Almighty Creator. Not only that, if they did have one, we just severed it. And no pun intended, we just killed that relationship. So that's how serious this is. Murder separates the relationship or the opportunity to have one. And the last thing their life does not matter. And we've said this before, the reason the life does not matter is because you've made yourself a little g God, and when you do that, only you matter, nobody else matters. And that sets up the opportunity, the attitude of murder. Look at the very first homicide, the first murder. Cain killed Abel. And look at these examples that we have here. Can you see that Cain killed Abel because he really didn't pay attention to the relationship to God? God said, okay, this is the way I want you to sacrifice. And he went his own way and made his own sacrifice. And he was jealous of his brothers. So his life mattered more than his brothers. He made himself a little g God. And when he did that, his brother's life didn't matter to him anymore, and he murdered. And he canceled the relationship of his brother to God. So you see how this works. So the point is, the reason there's a relationship between 1 and 6, which is don't have any other gods before me and don't murder, we have to recognize that the other person exists outside of ourself. We have to recognize that the other person exists outside of ourself or beyond ourself. And when we do that, we will not murder them because we recognize they exist. We're putting them before us. When we know God, or we have a relationship with God and love God for who He is, we have to have that. So the left side, which is have no other gods before me, once we have that down, once we have that first, then we can apply that to human beings. We have to have that relationship to God first, then we can apply it to human beings. When we don't have any other gods before our great Creator, then we will not make ourselves our own God over other human beings. So murder will not happen if we recognize the other person beyond ourselves. And murder will not happen if we love the other person for who they are. And in order to love the person for who they are, we have to put them over ourselves. When we do that, it should not lead to murder because we think of the other person first. When we think of ourselves first, then we put ourselves over other people and we become our little g God, and then we can murder, steal, whatever, all the other commandments, because life doesn't matter. The only life that matters is ourselves when we choose ourselves. But when we choose other people over ourselves, that's the whole point. That's the whole point of the Ten Commandments here. That's the whole point of the relationship here. Love God and love people. When you love God and that relationship to God, then you will naturally have that same love toward people. When you don't want to sever that relationship with God, it's the same thing. You don't want to sever that relationship with people. So, technically, by definition, if you sever your relationship with God willfully, you are actually committing murder to God, because you are saying, "Your God, you do not matter. All that matters is me." And you're actually murdering God. Just like when you say that to a person. When you say to a person, "Hey, your life doesn't matter. The only one that matters is mine," and you murder that person, you're severing that relationship because you made yourself up to be a little g God. I know it's kind of deep, it's kind of heavy, and it's kind of serious. But now you can see the relationship between the two of don't have any other gods before me and don't murder, and why these are the first two that are mentioned and at the top of the page. So what is relationship? I spoke of you have to have a relationship with God, and you have to have a relationship with people. And relationship in Hebrew has a numerical value of 858. And other phrases that share that same numerical value are abide in me and I in you. Wow, is that not awesome? You can see how don't have any other gods before me and don't murder is the relationship of God and people. Love God, love people. Abide in me, God says, and I in you. Another phrase is heaven is. And that is exactly right. Heaven is a relationship. Heaven is that relationship to God and that relationship to people. And the last one, the truth and the light. What did the Messiah say? I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man gets to the Father but by me. You can see there has to be a relationship with the Messiah. There has to be that relationship. When you love the Messiah and obey what he says, you will naturally carry that over to fellow human beings, which means love the Messiah and love people. When we do that, we won't have any other gods but him, because we love him and we love his relationship. And we won't want to murder because we love people and we love that relationship with people. Because we put no other things before God, we will put no other things before our relationship with people. I hope that brings more to light. I hope that makes more sense. I hope you can see now the relationship between those two commandments, 1 and 6. So next week we'll be doing 2 and 7. So stay tuned.